and welcome back to my channel. I'm Tahara Swigert, and today I'm updating you on what I read in August, specifically for my Newts, for sitting my Newts as part of the Magical Readathon. I talked a bit about this. I'll link up the video where I talked more about what I was going to read and why I was going to read it and how the Newts work. But the short version is it's a reading challenge where you read books based on prompts, based on subjects you might take if you were a student at Hogwarts and you were sitting your Newts. So I did my Owls in the month before this month, July. I have a video about that I'll link up. And for my Newts, I decided I wanted to be a professor of herbology. So you pick a career and then it tells you what grades you need to get in what subjects, and that tells you what books to read. As a professor of herbology, I needed to do 3 in herbology, 2 in defense against the dark arts, and then I needed to get an A to read a single book in 2 more subjects. I actually did more than I needed to do because, spoiler alert, I'm a nerd, which is why I want to be a professor. So here's what I read. First up, for an A in herbology, the prompt was quick. There are mandrakes, put on your headphones to protect yourself, listen to an audiobook. I very rarely listen to audiobooks. I think I was gonna do this prompt, but I ended up finding Veronica Mars on the Libby app. The Libby app is like an app that lets you check out books from your library, ebooks and audiobooks. And it was Veronica Mars and the $1,000 Tan Line, and it is narrated by Kristen Bell. So I listened to it. I didn't love it. I mean, I liked it enough to keep listening to it, but then as it continued to unfold, I was like, next up is to get an E, an excellent, exceeds expectations in herbology. And for that, we need to read a book that was in between 350 and 390 pages. The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So this is the first book in a series. It's YA fantasy. And this book is talked about so much. People love this series so much. What happens are 2 twins, Jude and Taryn, are kind of taken out of the mortal world into the world of Fae. And they live with fairies through a kind of violent beginning. They live with fairies. They have to learn how to survive. The fairies are very beautiful, but very cruel. There's a lot of deception and backstabbing and palace intrigue. And I really had to make myself keep reading this. If it wasn't already the end of the month, I would have put this down and started a different book by the time I realized how much it was not picking up the pace. I didn't like it. It's just, I like it. It might be okay written, but it's just really not for me. It is 370 pages. And I basically wasn't interested in continuing to read it until page 300. It picked up the last 70 pages. I almost was tempted to read the second book. I'm not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. I'm done. I'm sorry. To get an O in herbology, I needed to read a book with a flower on the cover. Stolen Things by R.H. Herron. It is a thriller. I've done a whole review of it. I'm going to link to that video instead of going into it again here. It was so good. I loved it. It's a flower on the cover. So I read this and I so loved this. I read this very quickly, did a whole reading vlog about it. I'll link it up so you can watch if you are interested in reading it. I suggest you go out and get it. I loved it completely. Next up, Defense Against the Dark Arts. I needed to read 2 books in there, and to get an acceptable, I needed to read a book that had a black cover under the dust jacket. The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. It does indeed, well, for starters, it has a Lisa Frank sticker from my toddlers on the inside cover, but it has a black under the, this was so good. I don't think I've talked with you yet about this. The woman gets a nannying job in the middle of the Scotland Highlands, and the house is a smart house. So you can do everything from your app, and then the parents leave town as soon as she starts. So she's stuck there with 3 little kids, and there's a teenager in the family who's not always there. And the house starts doing crazy things, and she doesn't know if it's technology. There's all this lore that this house, like old Scottish lore, that this house is haunted, and she finds out there's a poisonous garden, and you're like, is it the house? Is somebody messing with the apps? Then the last page, I was like, what? This book, like Ruth Ware's other books, are very atmospheric, very creepy, but nothing nothing bad happens, just a lot of things that make you feel tingly and like maybe this isn't safe, but nothing bad happens for most of the book. So if you've read The Woman in Cabin 10, which was the first book of hers that I read and really loved, I actually read that book while I was in Scotland. That was one of the books I took and I read on the train. She did In a Dark, Dark Wood, which is one of my most favorite, and it reminds me of this a lot, in that you're in a creepy situation, in a creepy place, but you're not quite sure if anything bad is happening or not. So that was for my Defense Against the Dark Arts A. For my Defense Against the Dark Art E, excellent, I simply needed to remember the first book that came to mind, a book that was on my to-read list. Now, this is a book that I am just finishing in the last days of August. So it is Final Girls by Riley Sager. I loved Lock Every Door so much, I decided to read his other books, and I am liking it. Final Girls is like a film nerd term for the one girl who gets out at the end of the horror movie. Well, this is their real life. I mean, this is fiction, but in the story, it's their real life story, is that they had an experience like that where everybody they were with, like a horror movie, was killed and they survived. And then things start happening to them. About halfway through. I'm going to finish it by the end of the month, so I'm counting it because I know it's going to be done. I'm recording this on the 30th, but I'm going to finish it probably tonight. The book is just like somebody navigating the world from a place of having survived this trauma. That's really what it's about, and how different people deal with the trauma differently, and then when they interact with each other, what happens. So that was my Defense Against the Dark Arts E, and then I needed to get an A in 2 subjects. So I got an A in Care of Magical Creatures by reading a book that started with the letter A, and I read at the very beginning of the month A Rule Against Murder by Louise Penny. I've talked about Louise Penny's mysteries before. I really love them. This followed the Inspector Gamache while he's outside of Three Pines, although some of the characters reoccur in this one, and it was interesting. It was a little odd what ended up being the thing that happened, but it was really beautifully written, and the characterization is so great. The descriptions of food, the description of place. I don't really usually like a lot of overly descriptive stuff. I want to get into the action, but her writing mixes just enough like beautiful description with action that is kind of gently moving, like you're unwrapping it. It's very much a cozy mystery. So Louise Penny, A Rule Against Murder, liked it a lot. And then I went ahead and A in Muggle Studies by reading a book that had a image or a photo element on the cover, and that was The Valedictorian of Being Dead by Heather Armstrong. I'll talk more about this in another video. I'll link it up here. I loved it. It's a memoir of Heather Armstrong's battle with depression and her treatment. And I'll link up to where I do the full review of that book. And then, because I'm a nerd, and that's all I needed to do to become a herbology professor, and then I got a E in Muggle Studies. So I only needed an A, but I went a step further because I read a book that came in for me at the library after a long wait, and then I realized, oh, this fits in with a prompt for an E in Muggle Studies, which is to read a book set in our real world. And for that, I read The River by Peter Heller. So The River is a story of 2 college friends who have decided to take a trip down the river in a canoe in the Canadian wilderness, and it's like a beautiful trip. Everything falls apart, and it is a fast-moving kind of outdoor survival tale. I don't usually like this kind of book, but it was recommended by Modern Mrs. Darcy in her summer reading guide, so I thought, why not give it a try? It was under 300 pages. I think that is how I sat my newts this month. These are the books I still have. Many of them have been returned to the library, but it was a really good reading month. This was super fun. I liked following specific prompts to read specific books. I read a lot of stuff I might not have followed through. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what I'm gonna read in September. If you want to see my September to be read list, you can become a member over on Patreon. I'm gonna be sharing my TBR list with them there today. So head over to patreon.com/TaraSwigert. You only have to pay $1 a month to get access to those extra videos every month. And at $2 a month, you'll get access to a book club, which this month we're gonna vote on our book and we're gonna start our book club next month. So head on over to patreon.com/TaraSwigert. I'll have it linked up below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you've subscribed so you don't miss any. And tell me what you think I should read next based on the books that I really liked this month.